I was just going to give my regular annotation, here's the data model presentation, but I thought maybe it's worth scoping what we mean by annotation a little bit more first. So, is this an annotation? Right. Does it communicate anything to anyone other than the person who made it? Maybe it says, this highlighted section is of interest to me, but it doesn't really say anything. What about sticky notes, where you write a note to yourself, I must buy milk, and you stick it on the fridge? Are you annotating something? Or imagine you were sticking the sticky note, I need to come back and read this passage again. Right? Are you annotating? Yes, but who's the target audience? Is this the sort of annotation that we need to work with in the hypothesis model? To me, I think the answer is no. Whereas this kind of annotation, the extreme case of annotation, where there is more annotated text than there is text being annotated, this is what we need to be dealing with. And this exemplifies the problem. You can't read anything. We need the reputation model to say, hey, this thing, this annotation, this is what we need to focus on. So it seems that there's two modalities of annotation. There's the aide memoire, the bookmarking, which is communicating only to your future self. I need to come back in the future and look again at this for some reason. And then there's the annotation that we're interested in, which is communicating to others. Right? If you're only communicating to yourself, we don't need hypothesis for that. So for communication, then in general, is increasingly open, online, collaborative, and distributed. I don't think that's a particularly contentious statement. So these digital annotations then aren't limited in distribution. They're definitely online. Hopefully they're collaborative, and hopefully they're open to systems, but also to everyone, as opposed to locked down annotations that you only share with a very few. But this is because of the digital medium that this is possible. Previously, annotations where you get a highlighter, you have to physically give the book to someone else to share your annotation. That's why they were only notes to future self. So reputation modeling then for annotations, we've discussed this in depth so far. It reduces unnecessary or unwanted communication, so spam, which enhances the ability to be open without the system collapsing. Promotes effective distributed ad hoc collaborations where you get the reputation model together, so the matching use case. And in my perspective, it bridges the gap between the theoretical models of annotation in general and the practical concerns of what happens in reality. So the collaboration then has a focus on the sharing of annotation, since open rather than just annotation collaboration. It's web-centric as opposed to a lockdown silo, let's just make another Reddit or another Stack Overflow or another pick your silo. We want to be able to create, consume, and interact with annotations in different environments. So you might create an annotation in one environment and then see it again in a completely different environment. That's what we want to happen. And then the model, hopefully you'll agree, we build from a simple model for the simple cases out to a more detailed model for the more complex requirements. As the majority of participants in the collaboration, as you can see, are universities, we of course have lots of scholars saying, hey, but I want to model this very particular thing. So we've tried to distill the essence of what the scholars want to do down into a model that enables it for everyone. So the collaboration is the Salamos National Laboratory, the research library there, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, University of Queensland in Australia, University of Maryland and George Mason, plus many, many adopters and partners. Our design guidelines are based on the architecture of the World Wide Web. Hopefully they're general enough for adoption, but rich enough for use cases. We're in beta status at the moment. We have a pretty solid model with 9 ongoing funded experiments to either validate or provide hopefully minimal changes for a 1.0 specification. In the near future, we're working with the annotation ontology folks who are based in Harvard and Manchester in England to merged the annotation ontology and open annotation communities. So they started from a very bottom-up approach. They built a very simple system and then tried to layer on complexity as people came with new use cases. We started from a top-down approach. We gathered all of the use cases and then tried to model something that would be able to describe those use cases. This is happening under a W3C community group framework, so you're all welcome to join. And then the intent is, of course, to take it to the W3C proper and get them to stamp it as the W3C annotation standard. We have some good contacts there in W3C, and they're all very hopeful that this is going to happen. So as far as we're concerned, the open annotation data model is the new annotator. So we had a couple of meetings. We've got another meeting in March, and we're going to roll it out to W3C. Okay, so I forget who it was yesterday. I think it was Drummond. If you can't describe it as a graph, then don't describe it. Here's the graph. So an annotation then has three basic components. You have the comment, the thing that someone is saying. That has to be about something. So here's the thing that it's about. And the annotation, which is the thing that actually instantiates that aboutness relationship. So the annotation says that this is about that. But all of those three things are individual resources. An example. There is a YouTube video, which was not created by me, about the Hubble Deep Field image. This is obviously about the Hubble Deep Field image. So this was created in 2006, I believe. This was created in 2008. And last year, I created an annotation that asserts the relationship between those two objects. They all have different creators, they all have different times, they all have completely different properties. But it's an annotation in whole. The first thing that we ran into is that most annotations really are about part of something. You don't want to say, hey, I really like this paper. You want to say, I really like this paragraph in this paper because blah, 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 blah. Or, I disagree with this point. You don't disagree with the entire paper, maybe. So, at first we had hoped that this was going to be supported in the web architecture, but of course it's not. Fragments are possible for some things, and with the media fragment specification, you can do it for more things, but there's always situations where you need to have some more descriptive way of saying, it's this bit that I'm talking about. So we introduce two new objects, the constraint, which describes the part that you're talking about. So it somehow constrains the whole resource. So the constraint describes the part of the target that you're talking about. And the constrained target identifies the section described by this guy. So description and identity, we like to keep separate, and I'll show you why. So this arbitrary space here within the Hubble Deep Field image, you might want to describe it with some SVG, right? It's an SVG path. That would be nice and interoperable because all browsers now support SVG. But if this is a resource, because it's a huge path maybe, if you dereference it, you want to get to the SVG. And maybe you want to comment on the SVG. So the description says, hey, this is how you find it. But you're not talking about the description, you're talking about the content of that part. So that's why we need the identity for it to be separate. Blank looks, or... So, imagine if these two were collapsed, and you tried to dereference the URI to get back that thing. Would you get back the SVG, or would you get back the part of the image? It wouldn't be clear, right? If it identifies this part of this image, you would expect to get back the part of the image. So this guy identifies the SVG that describes it. So if you dereference it, you expect to get back the SVG. And hence you need the two nodes. Okay, now I see nodes. Good. In terms of openness and sharing, it's designed for publicly sharing annotations, so we don't have any sort of built-in users or groups or permissions or this person can do that or this person can see that. If communities want to do that, then they can hopefully overlay it on top. It's all RDF underneath, so you can add as many properties to anything as you want. In terms of permissions, you can always use existing web authentication and authorization systems, right? We're not going to reinvent password protection just for annotation. That would be insane. Of course, users do want flexible sharing options, but we see that as an overlay. And the underlying thing, there is of course a possible marketplace, such as instantiated by Hypothes.is, for systems that do filtering and ranking of annotations, so that you always see the most appropriate annotations for your situation, for your context. The other thing to note is that OAC clients are autonomous. We have a data model. We don't have a protocol. So for example, if you're familiar with the previous work on Annotation at the W3C, they have a data model that's about this big. It says there's something which is a body, but we're not really sure what it is. There's a target, and there's this node thing that connects the two. Done, right? And here's the HTTP set of interactions that you need to use, and it was huge. So if you're implementing Annotation, you're implementing a protocol. If you implement OAC, you implement the data model, and then how the interactions are up to you. So we promote a publish-subscribe mechanism. We don't, of course, enforce it. So there's no reliance on a server. If you want to put your annotation in your public Dropbox and then send people links to it, that's great, right? People can get to it. If you want to put it in a blog, and then a crawler will come and harvest your blog and put the annotation from the blog entry into its system, great. The one restriction, of course, is that servers have to mint URIs for annotation so you can get to them. Otherwise, you can't share. So we don't specify how the publishing happens. You send your annotation somewhere. We don't specify how other people can get the annotation, nor do we specify how other people then re-consume your annotation. That's just part of the way the web works. We don't need to reinvent that. Okay, so what about? There's a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't talk about. So what about other attributes? Yes, it's RDF, just pile them on. We had a question yesterday about annotating annotations. Can we do replies? Yes, absolutely. The target can be any resource, as can the body. It's just a link between any two arbitrary resources or parts of resources. What about annotating more than one thing? Yes, absolutely. Just say, hey, it annotates this, and it annotates that, and that, and that, and that. The body could be part of a resource. So, this part of this PDF is about this part of this data set. If it's just a small comment, I like this, or whatever, why do we have to create a new web resource that you dereference just to get the text I like this? That seems really wasteful. Yes, we agree. So there's a W3C standard called content in RDF, which allows you to embed arbitrary content within RDF graphs. So all you need to do is publish your one annotation document that includes the body. Well, what if there's no body? Right? If we just want to do that original highlight thing, where's the comment? Yes, so as much as we didn't like this, we didn't think it was communication, and it's a real use case for many people. And we want to allow you to share your highlights just as much as we want to allow you to share your thoughts. So in the merged open annotation and annotation ontology system, we will allow to have an annotation without a body, but it should be typed as a highlight or a marker. So another question that came up yesterday, what happens when resources change? How do we deal with that? So we record the time of the resource at the point when it was annotated, and then we can use the Internet Archive and other memento systems to resolve the representation that you would have got at approximately that time. And another question about machine-readable bodies. Yes, we have data annotations, where you can think about it, the body of normal annotations is a human, right? You write it in plain text, another human reads it, and they get information. Equally, if the body's audience is a machine, you write it in a way that a machine can understand, and they gain information. So we don't do anything different. We just say, hey, this is an annotation where the body is intended for machines. And everything else just works. So there's a quick whistle-stop tour of the past and future of the collaboration and the data model that we've been producing.